1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
All right, there we go. Anchors away. It is Detroit, City of Champions, the podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And diving deep into 1935, the year and everything around it.
Today it's about to get super deep.
Yeah.
Super deep. And it literally super deep.
And we've studied a whole bunch of stuff throughout the podcast, and we are waist deep. We are neck deep into Gar Wood.
Yes.
And just the
I would say waist
thunder
deep.
from down
I would
under.
Say waist deep. We got another half of a body to go to really wrap this one up.
Yeah.
But this is
so, and that's the thing. I was looking back, and you had asked me to, because people can follow us. And if you're listening, hey, that's a good time to mention it. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe, collect, leave a comment. It's very, very cool. Tell a friend. That is very, very cool.
That's the best thing in the world. Share it with somebody. Yeah.
But it's on Facebook and it's on YouTube. People can watch wherever, and then the audio podcast on nearly every pod app available. You can find it. So wherever you're listening, thank you so much. And then on the YouTube, I was making playlists, and I was looking at how many episodes because we really took our time with Joe Louis. And that was kind of
neat. You look back at the Tigers, we have like five total episodes for 2 years of Tigers. I know. We're going to revisit those subjects because we were just getting started.
We're figuring out. And that's the thing. It's like they talk about podcasts, and they say about 80% of podcasts never make it past the 7th episode. We're on episode 57.
57.
I'm pretty happy about that.
I am too. I
can't wait to hit 100. I'm really looking forward to hitting 100.
About one season in Detroit sports history.
Yeah.
About one season. That's what's so crazy.
Yeah.
What others, just to show you how great this season was.
Right.
What other season in the history of American sport?
Single season,
name one single year in the history of American sport that you could even be where we're at with 57 episodes.
Right.
You would for 57 episodes for one single season. You'd have to be talking about the color of somebody's socks by this point, And as you're about to hear in this show,
well, we did talk about the color of socks in the Red Wings. That's germane to the thing.
Yeah, but what I'm saying though, but what I'm saying is
socks
that
are a thing.
This is that as we're going to see today, that we're going to be full throttle.
Yeah,
full throttle. This is going to be one of the most fascinating things that, as a listener of this show, this is going to be one of the most amazing stories you have ever heard.
I love because you love Gar Wood. You've said
I love
it before.
It's my favorite story. The entire city. There's 33
Hmm.
championships in 1935, and this is my favorite of them all.
And then you said as we were getting
not
ready
my favorite.
today,
It's my favorite story.
Right. And you said that the aspects of today's episode, number 57 here, is some of your favorite parts of the Gar Wood story.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorites. This is one of my favorite components of it. And we've been laying a lot of groundwork for this. We've been telling a lot of the backstory.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's going to really kind of, vector together in this story I'm about to tell here. But I'm going to say it again real quick. We've been making claims since the beginning of this.
Sure.
It's the greatest season ever. Joe Louis had the greatest individual season in American sport history, despite him not even being listed amongst the top 100 on any rankings. We make a ton of different claims on this show. And I'm saying right now, if this is not what I'm about to present today, if this is not one of the greatest stories or one of the most interesting things you've ever heard on any podcast regarding sports, then I'll say right now, don't even listen anymore because I'm a liar. I'm a liar. If this is not one of the coolest and most fascinating stories in all of, not just like that you've ever heard, but in all of Detroit sports history, this story that you're about to hear today should be one of the should be on like sort of a just like a Mount Everest, or not Mount Everest, but a
Mount Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore of Detroit sports stories.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just one of the stories we're going to be doing, and we're going to be doing episode number 58, and we're going to be telling another great story.
When we last left Gar.
Yeah.
He was having trouble getting people to race. He was racing trains, and he was starting his own circuit.
And he's racing in a tuxedo to kind of get everybody interested because he's racing in a tuxedo. Because people said it wasn't gentlemanly, so he won a race in a tuxedo.
Yeah.
But he was doing these little stunts because he was at the top of the game, and there was nobody in the world that wanted to challenge him.
But now things are picking up. So he's starting. There's some competition starting to come back.
The French challenged him. The French challenged him in 1920.
Didn't go well for the French a couple of times.
No, they couldn't even. The first one, the boat caught on fire before they got to Detroit. And then in 1926, when they challenged him for the Harmsworth, they got the boat in the river, but then they couldn't get it started.
Yeah.
And then Gar Wood's men even went to try to help him get it started, just so they could have a race.
Couldn't get it started.
And they couldn't get it started. So Gar Wood's 3 boats raced against each other in the
Who won that one again?
Take a guess.
Gar won that one.
Gar Wood beat his brother and somebody else to in the Miss America VII, beat out the Miss America III and Miss America IV. So Gar Wood's 3 boats raced each other, and Gar Wood, of course, one of the 3 boats. Gar Wood piloted boat 1,
and that brings us over to where we're headed today.
Yes, which is 1927 again. So again, 25 and 26, there was a theoretical. 25, there was no race. 1926, there was a race against the French, but the French didn't start the boat. 1927, there's no race, but now we're in 1928, and from here on out, it's going to be, like I say, year after year after year is going to be some of the most incredible stories you've ever heard with regard to anything. I mean, I never got into the City of Champions going like, oh, I'm interested in speedboat racing. I had no interest in speedboat racing. I had no interest in speedboat racing until I started hearing about this stuff.
Well, and then part of that was your research. You came across this book called The Speedboat Kings.
Exactly. The Speedboat Kings, it's one of the greatest history books of all time.
And the writing in it is it's really rich.
It takes you into the boat, man. Yeah. It's amazing. J. Lee
and it was
Barrett's
so first
amazing.
person because he was there. He was literally there.
Yeah, for those of us that might be going for the first time, this is the Speedboat Kings book.
I got it up there. Yeah.
Oh, you got that up on the screen. Good. Yeah. So I got my copy right here. It's one of I don't know how many copies, but not very many because, like I say, I got it for I think $100 8 years ago, and the last listing I saw it on Amazon was for $800. So good. So Chris was typing in saying that he thinks he might have found a library copy, and that's what I'm saying. That. Like you could find yourself a copy in any bookshelf. Look for Speedboat Kings because besides just the value of I wouldn't even sell my copy. No. I don't even care. It's not even worth. I don't want to sell for $800 because then I have to buy it back. But I'm not gonna,
right. It's
like mine.
1927.
Yeah, 19.
No, we're at 1927.
Yeah, so we're rounding into 1928.
Okay.
And so in 1928, Gar Wood gets a challenge this time from England. So going forward,
and that's for the Harmsworth.
This is for the Harmsworth. Yes, this is the only trophy that this is the only trophy that matters for Gar Wood at this point. Is the Harmsworth. It's the international world championship. All the boats, all the materials for the boats have to be made in America. The boat
has to be made from where they originate. So English boats have to have English engines and English woods.
All English woods, all English carburetors, all English everything. And that's a difficult thing to find.
So the French need that. That had to be all French.
Yes.
When he was racing the French, it had all to be French.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's the idea is that each boat has to be built into out of the parts from the country.
We just got out of World War I.
Yes.
And so there's all this Army surplus, and there are all these. So he had quite the surplus to work with.
Well, he was using them.
That was a couple episodes
back. The big
thing
thing is that the American airplanes were using. Originally he used the Curtiss engines, which were decommissioned. The U.S. Air Force never used the Curtiss engines.
Rejected them. They didn't use them. So
that's why he was able to get his hands on some. And that was his big thing, was turning aircraft engines into using it for boats.
Right.
Because they were lighter and more powerful than car engines. That's what really started giving him the advantage. And so after World War I, he brought in all these surplus engines from all these different airplanes. And, of course, the Liberty Packard engine was like the best one. And so he's got Packard, which is Detroit, of course. So he's got a Liberty Packard Detroit engine in his boats. And so that's what he's been modifying. And, the whole thing is really to reduce the weight. Because to get that energy out of those engines and to with as little weight as possible.
So this Harmsworth, you're challenging from your country. Your boat has to originate from your country.
Every
England
piece.
Here
Yes.
in 28, England is saying, put them up.
Yeah, so England challenges. England wants the title back.
So is it like just the English team and then Gar's team?
Well, in this case, It just depends.
Or do other teams from other countries jump in too at that point?
Yeah, there are various ones, but usually there's a main challenger,
Right.
and then a lot of times there'll be some people that jump in that see what, just, hey, we might as well put a boat in the river and see what happens. Maybe
Okay.
the other boats break down. So you'll find that kind of happens, but usually there's like a centerpiece of the race of the
Right.
person that challenged versus the previous winner.
And this time it's England.
This time it's England, and in this case, of course, the rules of the race of the boat world at this time are that if you win the race, whether it's a Gold Cup or whether it's the Harmsworth, the International, if you win the race the previous year, the opponent has to face you on your river, of course.
Yeah.
And so England has to come to Detroit and race on the Detroit River. And so in this, and it's not just necessarily the government of England. In this case, you have a lady, and this is I was actually going to name the title of this because she's just a fascinating character, but we ended up naming it something different. It was a lady who challenged Gar Wood, which is reminiscent of another lady that was a boat
The very
racer
first winner
earlier
of
on,
the very first
yeah,
Harmsworth.
Dorothy Levitt, I believe her name was.
Yep.
And so in this lady, her name is Miss Marion Barbara Carstairs.
Okay.
And so she is. So her mother was the second child to one of the founders of Standard Oil. Okay, so Standard Oil is probably one of, if not the biggest company ever.
How could they ever fund it?
Ever made? Yeah. So she is basically from her earliest age, and there was a couple things she did, like she ended up getting married just so she could get this dowry from her mom, and then they divorced just so she could get the money.
Oh my gosh!
So she could just have access. I mean, but she is fabulously wealthy, and she can. And then when her grandmother died, who was married to the founder of Standard Oil, one of the founders of Standard Oil, then she even got even richer. So she's got as much money so there's no financial advantage between her and Gar Wood. She's got as much money as she wants to spend. And so, but she was this. We have a picture of her to put up you have it up on the screen.
Yeah.
She's anyone has a chance to look her up, it's really an interesting read. Her name is again Miss Marion Barbara Carstairs. There's no way we can get into her today. It'd basically be an entire show. But she's a fascinating person, really interesting person. She drove just a little brief synopsis. She drove ambulances during World War I.
Oh wow!
At this point, she's really just totally into speedboat racing. She's got a string of victories in the French Riviera. She won the 1926 Duke of York Trophy, which is sort of like England's equivalent of the Gold Cup. Her nickname was Jo instead of the full handle of Miss Marion Barbara Carstairs. They called her Jo.
Okay,
and she was also known at this moment as the fastest woman on water. So to prepare for this race, she hired S.E. Saunders, who had built a Maple Leaf 4, which had won the 1912 Harmsworth, which was the last Harmsworth that the English won.
Okay.
And so I think it was the Maple Leaf 5 or 6, which is what Gar Wood beat in 1920 to take the trophy back and bring it back with him to Detroit. So she hired this original guy, and so there was reasons to believe that she had a very good chance to win this race, not just because of this developer,
right.
of this guy, but because of a new engine design, for a new British engine design called a Napier Lions engine. And so to kind of remind everybody, we talked about the Liberty engine, and now briefly at the beginning of this episode. But the Liberty engine was right around 500 horsepower. Okay, and then Gar Wood had two of them in his boats, so he had in essence a 1,000 horsepower in his boats with these two Liberties. So this Napier Lions engine was 875. So the idea is that one of these engines is nearly equal to two Liberties, and if she's able to put two of them in a boat, that gives her a massive advantage.
Wow, okay.
A massive advantage over Gar Wood for this race.
Well, you got to keep it afloat, and you can't blow up.
Well, that's
those
the key.
Two,
yeah.
Those are two very important things.
Exactly. So, but at the very least, the fact that she's got this this Napier Lions engine, this is this represents a major threat. Whereas the French, Gar Wood's building all Miss America 4, 5, 3, 4, and 5. Just to get ready for this race. Even the J. Lee Barrett even says Gar Wood didn't even think the French had it in them.
Sure.
But this race, he believed that they did.
Okay.
So he made some serious moves. So getting ready for this race, the Miss America VI is born. Okay. And so this Miss America VI is unlike anything that he has ever done yet. Because at this exact same moment, There's a Packard engineer, his name is L.M. Woodson, who had worked for months with the U.S. Navy Bureau of Aeronautics to develop a reduced weight 770 horsepower airplane engine that could be tweaked to 1,000 horsepower per engine. So she's got these Napier Lions 875. This 770 horsepower airplane engine could be tweaked to 1,000 horsepower, right? So he's potentially got two 1,000s over the 875. So at great expense, Gar Wood bought two of these. I mean, these are like in beta testing. These are not, they're not. The U.S. Air Force is not like mass producing these. These are like prototypes, okay? And so at great expense, Gar Wood buys two of these engines and installs them into the newly built Miss America VI. Okay. So the Miss America VI is built with these two new Packard, super weight 1,000 horsepower engines. Again, so the previous boat had two 500 horsepowers. This new Miss America VI has got two 1,000 horsepower.
That's quite the leap.
It's a mass. It's double. We're
not going to 750. We're just jumping right to 1,000.
We're doubling the speed. And again, he's already been pushing 80. He's already been pushing. He's already broke the record with. He's right now currently he holds a world record for speed on water at 80 miles an hour. And so now he's got double the horsepower, right?
And now he's got a race in front of him.
Now he's got a race. Okay, so I'm going to read you the article. Okay, so. This is shortly after Gar Wood installs these engines into the Miss America VI, and this is 15 days prior to Carstairs' arrival. Okay, so this is a little over 2 weeks.
A lot of time for testing.
Leaving a ton of time for testing. So I'm going to read you the article of the test of
race day's not a test.
Okay, and this is where I live up to my boast about one of the greatest things. So this is the beginning of this. Okay, all right. So this comes from Speedboat Kings. So Gar Wood and Orland Johnson, his mechanic, took it out on the river for its first trial, meaning the Miss America VI. It gave them the fastest ride they had ever had in their lives. When Johnson pulled the throttle, the whole quivering thing leaped into life. They were going so fast that their eyeballs felt flattened out of shape by the force of the wind. Johnson said that telegraph posts on shore looked something like the teeth in a fine comb. Wood feared to give Johnson the signal for open throttle. He wasn't sure what would happen because he felt the bow was digging in. They strung the boat up in her cradle for the first time in their lives. They were wondering what was going to happen when the throttle was out all the way. After a night's rest, they felt a little more daring. They were out there in the boat well again, getting ready. They didn't care. The St. Clair River was as smooth as glass. While Wood was fastening his two teddy bears more securely to the engines, he turned to Johnson, said, "A beautiful day to give her the gun, Orland. What do you say?" "Well," Johnson replied nervously as he scanned the river, I can hang on to the throttle. It's okay with me if you can hang on to the wheel." They got ready, goggles, face grease, ear batting, life belts and all. They jumped into the cockpit, pressed the ignition button, and cut a swift course down the river. They went easy at first, feeling the tremendous power. Then Wood swung the boat around and they headed upstream. He waited until the course ahead was straight, no bends in the river. Then he nudged Johnson. That meant open throttle. Johnson didn't hesitate. He pulled the throttle. Bedlam broke loose in that tiny craft, the shod hoofbeats of 2,000 steeds. Wood felt like his flesh, quivering like that, was being ripped from his bones. The whole thundering herd was riding hard and fast through his head. He glanced at Johnson just for a fleeting second. Johnson's face was a strange blur whipped out of shape by the wind. Then, all at once, there was a deafening roar, sharp, quick, piercing. A tremendous hour followed, or perhaps a moment it was, a blur in time, a kind of twilight sleep. At first, Wood thought he'd passed into another world suddenly, but he opened his eyes and realized he was underwater. He looked up toward the surface, and sticks, tanks, and 1,000 broken parts of the boat were spinning perilously near his head in the water above him. He felt comfortable in the well-padded seat of the boat, holding desperately to the steering gear. His instinct told him to continue in his present condition rather than get mixed up in the chaos above him. But in a few seconds, he found himself changing his mind swiftly. He was getting into deeper, colder water, and the pressure was getting terrific. He was certain now, for the first time, that he was actually alive because he was becoming aware of the possibility of being pinioned under what was left of his boat if he continued to sit there comfortably doing nothing. He knew now that something horrible had taken place, and in the desire of self-preservation, he decided to let go and start paddling for the surface. Besides, he wanted to breathe, and there was no available air where he was. How far up the air was he didn't know, but there was no point in hanging on, so his hands left the wheel. A very faint feeling of joy. He could move them. He could move his hands. He was going up, always up now. In a moment he thought he'd reach the surface, but it seemed to never to come. Some air. He could feel that it could go through him like a knife. Finally, the surface. Wood said afterward it was the longest trip he had ever had in his life, that trip to the surface. In the surface, covered with blood, floating gas tanks, his new boat in a million slivers. Then he thought of Johnson. He couldn't see him. The sight of that blood on the water made him feel faint. He snatched at one of the floating gas tanks and hung on. He looked around for Johnson again. Johnson's head bobbed up through the pool of blood. His throat was cut almost from ear to ear, his main jugular vein exposed. Wood thought then that Johnson was dead. My God, he muttered, Johnson is dead. But Johnson wasn't dead. Jay Smith, who had been watching the trial from his boat, picked Johnson up and took him to the dock. Wood was brought to shore in another boat. Johnson was unconscious for more than an hour. The first thing that came from his lips was, "Guess we'll have to build another boat." The title of the episode.
I guess we'll have to build another boat.
That is the most. Is that? Tell me that it's not incredible.
Oh,
They're the hoofbeats of 2,000 steeds.
That's just grit.
I know,
too,
man. They're for the moment, for that one moment, they feel the hoofbeats of 2,000. They're going faster on water than any human being has ever gone. And then the boat. And then the most amazing thing is that Wood, they describe Wood, the description of Wood under the water, and J. Lee Barrett knows Wood intimately. He literally could go to Wood. He's part of the story. He could talk to Wood anytime he wants. That Wood is under the water, and he's still steering the boat, as though he's like driving it.
Yeah.
He's unaware.
All right, crazy man.
He's unaware that the boat.
You got a seat and a wheel. That's all you got left.
Yeah, he's just still steering the boat like he's driving. He actually walks through the thought process of the stunning of like 1 second he's a king of the world, and the next second he's just trying to scramble for air.
Sure. Wow.
So Miss America VI explodes on the Detroit River.
Crap.
So they're in the 15 days before the race. Okay? So that's where we're at. So this is the story, right? So
that brings us to Miss America VII.
Well, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So before the explosion, Orland Johnson noted that the tachometer gauge read 2,400, which equates to 98 miles per hour.
Oh.
They were up to 98 miles an hour before that thing exploded. He noticed on the tachometer that so he tells Gar, Orland's in the hospital.
Dude, we're at 98.
We were at 98, man. Gar, they're both alive. They're both alive. What the hell? Anything you can walk away from, it just kind of makes you stronger, I guess. So here's the situation, okay? Mm-hmm. So both men had survived, but they're pretty beat up. They both had various injuries, of course. So Orland Johnson's throat got slit. His jugular vein got slit.
It's not quite the tuxedo cruise anymore. No,
they're not driving around.
It's a slightly different cruise this time around.
A fancy lady in a white dress is not going to have any oil or grease stains. These dudes just drove in basically an explosion. Man.
It was a different ride today.
Yeah, Orland got his throat slit, man. They even said his jugular vein was slashed, dude. So so the boats exploded. So the situation is the driver, Orland and Gar have survived by a miracle, but they have no boat. They have no engines. The engines are at the bottom of the St. Clair River because of the explosion.
Yeah.
And and there's only now there's by the time they're actually recuperate after a couple days in the hospital, they've only got 13 days until the race. And so what follows from this, and this is where I live up to what I said at the beginning of this show, that if this is not one of the greatest things you've ever heard with regards to Detroit sports history, then don't watch anymore because I'm a liar, right? But I'm not a liar, and what I'm about to show you is what follows next is one of the most amazing stories to ever happen in Detroit sports history. All
right.
Okay? Should we leave off for the next show, or should we talk about it now? Okay, I'll leave it. So we'll talk about it now.
I don't. You can leave me hanging.
No, I'm not. No, I want to talk about it.
All right.
I couldn't live with myself. I think our viewers would be furious if we left it there.
So this is.
So I want to live up to my.
We'll save the comic. We'll save the comic book for the next
because I said
episode.
if by the end of this show you haven't heard of this is the greatest story, I want to live up to that. I already
comic
said it. I was
book's in the
joking.
next-
I was
the
joking. I
next
wouldn't
story.
leave off with that. I wouldn't do that to people, and I wouldn't leave off with that either because I haven't. I know I haven't convinced you that this is the greatest story. I've laid the groundwork.
I'm on the edge.
I've laid the groundwork, but
look
now
at
we're
me.
going to hear the next component. Okay,
I'm all hyped up on my seat here. All right, come on.
Excellent. So, all right. So, where are we at? So this once again, this is from J. Lee Barrett's Speedboat Kings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So here we go. Miss Carstairs was already in Detroit, 40 miles down the river with her Estelle 2. That's the name of her boat, the Estelle 2. The race was just 13 days away. Could Wood get ready? The chances were 1,000 to 1 that he couldn't. The Packard engines were somewhere at the bottom of the St. Clair River in 60 feet of water. But where? Wood didn't know exactly, but they had to find those engines. They were the only ones like them in the world. It had taken Packard engineers 6 months to build them. If they found the engines, what then? M.J. Steele, Packard engineer, believed they might be cracked. Those engines hit the cold water at white heat, he said. We don't know what they'll be like if we find them. It looked like the Harmsworth Trophy would at last go back to England. Half the town of Algonac, the Coast Guard, the Boy Scouts, fishermen, everyone was scouring the river looking for those engines. But Wood didn't wait until the engines were found, and neither did Packard. Wood, being confined to bed for a day, called his men to his Algonac home. Napoleon Lycée, Vance Smith, Lawrence Smith, James McCarthy, and John Brewer. And together they laid out plans for a new and stronger boat. A direct telephone line was installed in Johnson's room at the hospital in Detroit so he could talk directly to the men. Meanwhile, Packard engineers had a truck standing by at Algonac with the governor taken off, ready to rush the engines into their Detroit plant, tear them down, clean them, and build them up again. A motorcycle police escort was ready to guide the truck on its way. Steele and G.H. Brody, Packard engineers, set up 2 lines of operation inside the Packard plant, one to tear down the engines, another to build them up. They had everything ready. Bell divers were sent to the bottom of the St. Clair River. When they started out to search for the engines, Mrs. Wood called to them, "Be sure to find the teddy bears." The teddy bears had been wired to the engines. Wood himself jumped into the cockpit of his amphibian plane and soared high over the river trying to spot the black blot of the engines at the bottom. But they couldn't be seen. Then suddenly, Wood remembered something. He had previously learned that an Algonac woman standing on the corner of her cottage on the river saw the boat go to pieces. Wood found the woman, and from the exact spot where she had been standing, calculated the possible location. Vance Smith, who frequently drives Wood's speedboats, went out to do the sounding. After 4 days and nights of constant searching, the engines were found in 60 feet of water, buried in 6 feet of black muck. The bell diver came up first with Mrs. Wood's teddy bears. When the engines were brought to the surface, part of the hull was still fastened to them. The tough mahogany wood had ripped off about 4 inches from where Johnson had been sitting. By only 4 inches, Johnson had been escaped being split in 2. The impact of the water had driven the rudder straight to the bottom of the boat. The engines were rushed to Detroit. Every part of them was torn down, cleaned out, and put back together again. Nothing had been damaged. Meanwhile, the hull builders were working in a mad race with time, driven ahead only by their unquenchable spirit. In exactly 13 days after the Miss America VI had cracked up, a new boat was built, Miss America VII. Johnson hobbled out of the hospital and supervised the work of setting the engines into the hull. The new boat went into the 1928 race for the British International Trophy without ever having a trial run. The varnish on her was still wet. Johnson was yet so badly crippled that he had to be lifted into the cockpit. He pressed the starting button, and again a new Miss America was on its way, and Wood and Johnson were again riding with death. That is, dude, that's like that. What? This is a whole community coming together. This is a whole community coming together to get these boats built for the race. They're not going to let this. They're not going to let this. They took them to the very last second. The lacquer was still wet when they took it out in the water. They never had a test run. Orland Johnson. The greatest thing is Orland Johnson being. They're like, why Orland Johnson? Why can't somebody else run the mechanic? They're like, no, we need Orland. We need Orland Johnson. Again,
You gotta have Orland.
Orland's getting in there going, easy. Easy. I got a bandage around his neck from a split jugular.
You got the Bears.
You got the Bears back recovered. You got the
Orland.
engines. You got Orland. You got Gar. You got
And then you got the Miss America
Could you
7.
imagine these two guys sitting back next to together? They got the Miss America 7, and then the greatest moment is the one of the things he doesn't really mention in this, and maybe he mentions in the book. I didn't read a little bit further on. This is out of the quote I have in my book, but is the moment that all these people in Detroit, they knew of what was going on.
Right.
They knew. They're reading the articles about this. There's people all down the riverfront looking for these engines and doing whatever they can. Packard set up a special delivery. The police are ready to escort the engines to Packard. Everybody's mobilized to make this happen. Can you imagine what it must have been like to be one of the 250,000 people that were on the riverfront that day? These people, they were there because they knew the story of that there was a boat race. So they most certainly knew about the events that had led up to it. Could you imagine being down there and seeing the Miss America 7 roaring down the river, coming down? Nobody had ever seen the Miss America 7 because the 6 had detonated 2 weeks prior, right? They didn't even they had to find the engines and this, and the boats come. Just the sound of it coming down must have just sent an absolute, the goosebumps down the spines of everyone there. And the race was inconsequential. Gar Wood, who do you
just getting
think
that
won?
boat back in the water.
Who do you think won the race? Gar Wood dominates this race. He destroys her.
Really?
It's not even, the race is an afterthought.
Oh
you know
my
what I mean?
gosh.
He's got two 1,000 horsepower. I think she only had one in her boat, the 875 Napier.
Okay.
And he's got two 1,000-pound Packards in his boat that had been pulled out of the lake, restored, refit, new hull built, back in the river, and ready for racing on the day of the race in full. Like the year before, the French couldn't even get their boat started. And in 2 weeks, they rebuild into the most elite boat that the world had seen up to that point.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's got every factor of what a fantastic story has. And like I say, it's just what happens if he doesn't do it? Carstairs wins the trophy out, by default.
Yeah.
She challenged it. He wasn't there. The boat didn't make it through, and the trophy goes back to England. Gar Wood's really not the guy anymore, and Detroit's no longer the home of speedboat racing.
Right. So Chris encapsulated that well. Holy crap, that's just amazing.
Thank you. I hope so. I hope I lived up to to the promise I said at the beginning of this, which is that this should be one. This story is just one component. There's going to be others. There's going to be other. This is just one of the. We're going to hear more and more like this going forward. But the whole story of Gar Wood, the world of speed racing at this time, the drama at this time. Keep in mind, this is 1920. This is 1928. There's nothing going on in Detroit sports world besides this.
Yep.
The Tigers are garbage. The Lions don't exist. The Red Wings had just come into the city. They were the Cougars at this point.
Right.
The Cougars were nothing. They were not even on the. They were a speck on the NHL scene, and the Detroiters looked at them as this weird Canadian hockey sport, whatever. So as I'm saying, this was Detroit sports in 1928.
Right.
This was
what was going on.
This is what was going on in the drama that people were following. Nobody, like this story here, where do you ever hear about this in today? You don't really follow sports that closely, but I'll tell you, as someone who does, you never hear this. You never hear this about Gar. Every once in a while you hear Gar Wood was a great speedball racer. He did this and that. No, Gar Wood was an amazing sports luminary and who authored one of the greatest stories from his life, from just him living his life and pushing the boundaries. And people like to say Orland Johnson saying, we're going to need another boat. Right? We're going to need another boat.
There's no way to describe that but grit. Mm-hmm. Just the determination and grit of these two guys.
Of all of them, the whole squad, the city, the people that are coming out looking for the engine, like the police, the Packard's setting up a special facility that's just ready to go at all times, ready to tear the engines down and rebuild them. Everything is lined up. And they're doing it all from the hospital. They even said in the article there, Orland Johnson, he wasn't even able to get out of the hospital until for like 2 weeks. I mean, he was giving all his orders from the hospital bed. They had a direct phone line set up from the hospital.
That's wild.
And like, no, can anybody else run the throttle for Gar? No. The answer is we need Orlin there, and like I say, they had to lift him in with a crane or whatever that squeeze him into the boat.
Jeez.
So anyways, so there's a little postscript to this race. The Miss America VII, after the race, goes on to set the official new world record at 92.838 miles an hour. 92.
Getting there. Getting there.
They're getting there.
Hello, 100.
They got two 1,000 horsepower Liberties. We're about to ratchet it up just a little bit in the next couple shows. So that's to say, they're getting there. It's been a long way. In 28 years, when they were putting along at 12 miles an hour as a world record for speed on water. Now we're at 92, and just in 25 years.
All right, we are going to continue with Gar Wood in the next episode, Charles. I concur. That's an amazing story.
You think we retained our listeners?
I kind of wish this was the episode that we had done in the Packard plant. We got
a lot more, man.
And sitting in front of Miss America 10, but it'll be nice.
Wait till we get to the Miss America 10. We're setting the stage. This is the Miss America 7.
Because the Miss America 10 is in the Packard plant here in Metro Detroit, and we got permission to go and record.
Really
next to
awesome,
it.
Dude. That's so freaking cool. I can't wait.
I got to go scout and see where we can set up.
Oh, dude, I want to be
how close we can get.
If we can sit in the 10, that'd be like one of the greatest things of all time.
I don't know if we can record in it, but maybe they'll let us.
Set it up, man.
I'll try.
We're gonna be, dude. If we're recording from the Miss America 10, that's the greatest
it's like
thing ever.
When we did last year. We're coming up on Champions Days.
I absolutely
We're
sitting in the Miss America 10 side by side, and we're doing a show about Miss America 10 in the Miss America 10,
without a doubt. But last year we did Champions Day, right? April 18th, and we recorded live at the Detroit Historical Museum, and we were talking about the plaque. That was awarded at the Cherry Festival that celebrated all the champions signed by all the governors and the president. And we were there right in front of it. But we came in and we're like, hey, we're here to, we got permission. And we're like, we're going to do the podcast. And they're like, yeah, all right, go ahead. And it's like nobody was watching us. We could have done anything in the museum. Yeah. I mean, we could have jumped in one of the cars or whatever we wanted. I'm like, how are you leaving us unsupervised? Yeah. Do I look like the kind of person who should be left unsupervised?
I think you have an honest face.
So maybe they'll leave us unsupervised and we'll jump in the boat.
Dude, well, I don't think. What are we going to do? What kind of harm are we going to do? We're not going to break the boat. We're going there out of reverence for this thing. I mean, this is like on my bucket list, for God's sake.
So that'll be cool.
Sit in the Miss America 10 to broadcast a show. But what I'm saying is, this is the story of the Miss America 6 to 7.
6 and 7.
This is the birth of the Miss America 7. The Miss America 6 is legendary too, just for its fate. Like what it was for them in there, just pushing the boundaries of speed on water, and then to get to the 7.
Yeah.
But as great as it was with the 7, dude, ratchet that up to an 11.
Oh, okay.
To get them saying the story, the evolution of these boats goes, because the 7's good for a second. Like that thing, they're pushing 92 miles an hour. Yeah. He's about to take this thing out for a minute. But anyways, by the time we get to the Miss America 10, but you saw what he had to do. Like Carstairs was threatening with this new Napier Lions engine, 875, so we had to take it up to the next level. But what the ongoing theme of what you're gonna hear as we go through episodes 58, 59, 60, and so forth to the rest of Gar Wood's story is that there's going to be, the English are going to say, screw that 875, we got a 1200. Screw that 1200, we got a 1300. And they're going to be coming, and they're going to be, the entire British Admiralty is going to get involved. Their entire British government is going to get involved.
Right.
They're going to be bringing engines of capacities that are previously unheard of in human understanding.
And Gar's
got to keep pace.
Bring it on.
Bring it on. And then it's going to get to the point with the Miss America 10, this is a little teaser, is that's going to get to the Miss America 10 where the British threat is so big. Yeah. It's so big that he has to go to ridiculous lengths Like, it's the nickname of the Miss America 10 is the Madman's Dream. Okay. This is not like, oh, they built a boat that was bigger than the last one. No, there is nothing.
The Madman's
This was
Dream.
there after the Miss America 10. There was no Miss America 11. It had maxed out insanity. Okay, it had maxed out insanity. And once he built the Miss America 10, there's nobody ever challenging him. Right. I mean, it's saying like that's where we're going with this. This is the Miss America 7.
Right.
The 8, 9, and 10. Those are stories that the listeners are going to have to tune into for episodes 58.
So yeah, so make sure you like and subscribe, and that way you won't miss any of this or the other stories as we unfold them all. It's the Detroit City of Champions, the podcast. We'll see you next time.